This is the story of a man named Stanley. These are the first words spoken to you as you find yourself in an office and everyone is just gone. No traces of them anywhere, and this disembodied voice begins to speak to you. Yes, this is a bit of a strange beginning, but the game itself isn't exactly conventional, which also makes it charming and unique in its own way. There aren't any massively revelatory gameplay inclusions here. It's just really what a lot of people would refer to as a walking simulator, which really is not a very accurate or even a fair category to put this game in. As the popular saying goes, Dear Esther is a walking simulator. This is really not. In fact, we're going to dive deep into the weeds of how this does not fit into that description and why walking simulator games is a term that gets thrown around more than a beach ball at a summer music festival. Let's start here with Stanley, his office, and the narrator in a game called The Stanley Parable. This is barely a game in the traditional sense of the word, in that there are no enemies to defeat, no boss waiting between you and the credits, no power-ups, no weapons, nothing to even hold in your hand in any way. They haven't even modeled anything in front of the player. No hands or HUD or anything. This is where I feel the term walking simulator really gets bandied about a lot. You just walk around, is what the argument will be here, I'm sure, but there's much more to it than that. You begin by simply checking out the office you have found yourself in, looking at computers, some of which you can interact with, typically just shutting them off though. Finding out all the doors around you are locked and there's really no other way to go, you hear the narrator subtly direct you to take the next direction. Now, here is where this gets interesting. You can either go one way or the other. The first decision you're given is left door or right door. If you take the direction suggested, the narration continues and the story unfolds in one particular way. If you go the opposite direction, take the opposite door, then you get something entirely different, and in that is where the Stanley Parable really shines as a unique experience. This is actually really interesting because this is a game of endings. Everything is based around the choices presented to you, the ones you make, and how it all plays out for you in the end. Well, one of the ends, that is. Also, the choices that you make along the way really also shape the experience that you have. Some of them being so unexpected by the narrator that he completely gets lost and confused. This can result in some pretty funny moments during the game. It had me laughing out loud in a way that Portal 2 had me doubled over my desk in laughter. This is really my high bar for how funny a game can be, by the way. If it makes me laugh as hard as Portal 2 did, then it has done its job of being funny. You can find yourself following a yellow line, which in itself feels like a wayward character in the game as well, and it's just a yellow line. When you can make an inanimate object seem like it has a derpy personality, that's really job done right there. Doors can open and close because the narrator can't decide which way you need to go. Hallways loop on themselves. You're convinced you're in a dream at some point. There's a mannequin. It's just such a unique experience, and that is what makes it really charming and endearing. It's also great because every decision you make really factors into the way the game plays out for you. It's not really involved decision making either. It's really down to things as simple as this way or that way, a left door versus a right door, going forward as opposed to diverting off to the side, push this button or that button. Each one of those options makes for an almost completely different game each time, though, which goes back to what I was saying earlier, in that it's a game of endings. Seeing how each of these series of decisions will play out for you, how things might get weirder or more goofy, serious, or just plain weird. It also kind of makes for some interesting thinking intertwined in all that goofiness. Kind of makes you really think about something as simple as being able to make a decision, or even what simple left or right kind of decisions can make in your life. What it even means to be content with a life where you don't get to make decisions or you don't get a choice. How freeing it can be to be given that option where when you have been used to the contrary for so long. I should say that I can't be 100% sure this is something that developers had intended or even a message that they wished to convey. These are just things that I've gleaned from some of the scenes and moments from this game. If this is the direction that you end up taking, which is really follow the narrator to the end, you could possibly see it this way, and only this way, but deviating from the super serious and taking some of the narrative direction into your own hands is where things get interesting and entertaining. I suppose something could be said even about that, though. If you follow the predetermined path for yourself or follow every single direction you were given, things may turn out all right, but the destination to get there would be a lesser journey, devoid of the things that could be interesting or comical or even confusing. There may even be a handful of restarts there and possible hiccups, but more often than not, the ending as a result of those things is a good deal more rewarding than it possibly could have been. What it definitely is not though is a walking simulator. Going back to that point, this is such a derogatory term and carries with it a certain stigma that, if applied in the right situation, is pretty accurate, but if it is applied to a game, then it usually follows it around like a bad smell, and it's hard to get people to think otherwise a lot of the time. I'm going to do you a favor here. I'm going to use 3 examples of why this is a term that should really be banned both from the YouTube community and the words of people who do game reviews. Let's look at the term itself and go from there. Walking simulator implies that all you do in the game is walk. That's it. You don't interact with anything, there's really no story to be had, you just walk around and look at the scenery. There's only one example I can think of that fits this description, and it doesn't even fit it 100%, and that's the old Dear Esther analogy. There's a bit of a story to be had there, so it isn't completely devoid in that aspect. There really isn't anything to interact with, though, and this is where I can sort of see what they are talking about when they want to slap that label on this particular game. Stanley, though, there are things to interact with, an actual world they make for you. Granted, since it is the source engine, there aren't as many things to play with as there normally are, but it isn't completely devoid. Buttons to press, computers to mess with, every doorway you go through triggers a different response and ending to the game, as I was talking about before. It crafts a story based on your decisions, which is a lot more than you can say for something that's supposed to only be about walking. Yes, there really isn't a lot of gameplay to be had here, but that's not really the point of this. It isn't a game about trick shots or stats or prestige or bragging rights. It's a story that you take part in and help shape. That's kind of the point of some of the earlier games. Text adventure games started that whole idea, and those were very successful at the time. People wanted something that could almost help their imagination go wild. We now live in some weird times. We have games that look like movies. We have VR. We have technology now that makes it really hard to use your imagination because it's all pretty much put there in front of you. It takes a lot of what that type of thinking out of the equation. Games like this, which are a little more minimalistic, makes you think with that part of your brain more. It makes you wonder about something you may not be able to interact with. It makes you wonder why something is there or even what it really is because it's not rendered in some kind of hyper-realistic 4K at 120 Hz at the same frames per second. We rely too much on technology and not enough on a good story, and I feel like something that deviates from the norm and doesn't offer an insane amount of gameplay gets slapped with walking simulators because so many other people say that's the way it needs to be. It kind of comes all the way back to Stanley again. By following this kind of thing and buying so much into that you don't have your own opinion, you yourself become a lot like Stanley, hitting a button because you're told to, walking through a door because you're told to, thinking that something is a certain way because you are told to. The Stanley parable takes the left door when the rest of the world is told to go right. It confuses people and leaves them wondering what happened. This is something that more games should aspire to do, that more people should strive to do. Take the path less taken. Make the people looking on kind of confused. Create your own yellow storyline. Laugh at it and enjoy the wacky music in the moment. You may not know what awaits you if you try something silly or even a little offbeat. The world itself is in an offbeat state as I record this, and it's important to follow the example of Stanley's journey. It's important to think, laugh, and feel. This has been a weird welcome addition to a weird time, and should definitely have good things said about it as it brightens up the gaming world, especially in a time when everything is, well, following a different yellow storyline. As should you. Until next time, folks. Until then.